Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Euroquestions, the bi-monthly webinar by the Jacques Delors Institute. Today, we have the pleasure to welcome Tornike Cortadze, Associate Researcher at the Jacques Delors Institute in Eastern Neighborhood and the Black Sea. 3 states of South Caucasus have been part of the Eastern Partnership Initiative: Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia. The degree of integration with the European Union differs significantly between the three countries. Azerbaijan did not conclude the associate agreement and see the EU primarily as a partner in energy. Georgia, on the other hand, was a long time the leader of the most advanced integration, and Armenia, although very much under Russian influence, was trying to keep a minimum interest for Europe. The wars in both Ukraine and Karabakh are nevertheless changing. So what are the next steps? Before handing the floor to our speaker, I would like to remind you that there is the Q&A tool available at the bottom of your screen where you can ask your question. Tornike, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Lara, and thank you for all of our audience who is listening this brief webinar today. I would start with the fact that today the European Commission has adopted an important document. It is a conclusion. It's a recommendation document about the enlargement, and it's about 4 countries: Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. Here we are interested in Georgia, and the recommendation of the Commission was to grant the candidate status to Georgia, provided that several, and namely 9 recommendations are fulfilled. So the final decision about granting the candidate status to Georgia will be taken in December at the Council. It will be 14th or 15th of December, but it's a significant step in this direction. This happened despite numerous problems in Georgia, and especially with the, to be honest, very contradictory behavior of the government, whose European aspirations were not guaranteed as such. But before coming back to this decision, I will go back to the and trying to present the general situation in the South Caucasus in the field of European integration and rapprochement. So we have 3 very different countries, not only in terms of culture and economy and etc., but also in terms of geopolitical orientation and internal situation. In 2009, this historical decision to include Southern Caucasus in Eastern Partnership was made, and it was made mainly because of the war of 2008 between Georgia and Russia. So it was a geopolitical decision from the European Union, and this decision was very much the merit of then the leaders of Sweden and Poland, who were initiators of Eastern Partnership, plus many new members of the European Union, Baltic states, Czech Republic, Romania, etc., who wanted stronger relations with this region. And many of them, not all of them, but many of them thought that these countries had the European future. So when Eastern Partnership was launched, there was, as I said, different opinions inside the European Union. Some of the members, and especially Western European members and founding members, thought that it was mainly about strengthening relations, about economic integration, but not political integration of these countries. On the contrary, for those who were in the East, it was the first step for further political integration. As usual in European Union, things there is this ambiguity in the decisions, and then the time shows in the future in which direction things will evolve. For many years, these three countries, adopted different political agenda. Georgia then was very active in terms of integration with the European Union and also NATO. I'm talking about the government. I was part of the government before 2012, and I was the chief negotiator of association agreements with the European Union. So we concluded the association agreement negotiations in 2.5 years. Plus the deep and comprehensive free trade area negotiations, the CFTA, and Armenia and Azerbaijan didn't, for different reasons. Armenia was eager to conclude the association agreement and the DCFTA. Their government worked hard to agree on the documents, but in 2013 they met a tremendous Russian pressure, and Armenia renounced to sign the association agreement treaty with the European Union under Russian pressure. And then we all remember that the president of Armenia, South Caucasian, declared that they were more interested in Eurasian Union that was at this time not already existed at this time, but was in the plans of Russia. Azerbaijan renounced mainly for internal reasons, because the provisions inscribed in this document were not necessarily interesting for the ruling elite and the government, because there were lots of provisions about the good governance, human rights, etc. Plus, the economic agreement, the CFTA, included a very important provision, which was the membership, WTO membership, and WTO membership implied also the end of monopolies. And the political system in Azerbaijan was, and is still, founded on monopolies. So Azerbaijan renounced for political reasons, internal political reasons, and declared that they were interested in economic cooperation with the European Union, and also especially energy cooperation in the field of energy. And we see, since the war in Ukraine and the embargo on the importations of Russian gas and oil in Europe, the growing importance of Azerbaijan for European energy markets. So after this, I mean, after the famous Vilnius summit, Eastern Partnership Summit, Georgia concluded also visa liberalization agreements with the European Union, and that was a very important step in terms of people-to-people contacts and to bringing really Georgia closer to European Union. But things have changed progressively. The Georgian government, new governments, which is not new anymore because they won 2012 elections, started to distantiate themselves from European Union, becoming increasingly critical with the conditions of rapprochement with the European Union, and is today, and especially since the last few years, on the very slippery slope of on the road of, let's say, reinforcing authoritarian tendencies, became the best friend of Viktor Orban's Hungary, which is now the main lobbyist for Georgia in the European Union, and made some worrisome decisions in terms of not fulfilling and not really being in line with the principles and basic principles of the European Union and values in terms of protection of the minorities, in terms of protection of pluralism, and organizing free and fair elections with the level playing field during the elections. And also, since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, becoming less and less aligned with the European positions on Ukraine. Georgia didn't adopt sanctions concerning Russia, is even indirectly helping Russia to circumvent the sanctions. Georgian economy was boosted by this policies of allowing Russia to avoid European sanctions, because the last 2 years the economic growth was double-digit in Georgia, and also starting direct flights with Russia and criticizing more and more Ukraine and not Russia. In 2000. Now, when it comes to Armenia and Azerbaijan, things have also changed. Armenia experienced in 2018 a popular Velvet Revolution, which brought to power a more pro-Western and more pro-democracy leadership with the current Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. And since Armenia had a very difficult geopolitical situation, the leadership, even if they were more pro-Western, understood that the radical changes were impossible, but they started at least some attempt to diversify their foreign policy and to be less dependent on Russia. If we have time to develop it more, I will do it with pleasure. But the result was that Russian support for Armenia diminished, and in parallel, Azerbaijan, since many years, was planning to retake the lost territories during the 1990s war. We know that in 1994 the ceasefire was concluded between Armenia and Azerbaijan Azerbaijan lost almost 18 to 19% of the control of its territory, including Karabakh, but beyond Karabakh. And these territories were occupied by Armenian forces. And Azerbaijan, as always, thought about a revenge. The first years were the years of negotiations, but these negotiations didn't give any results. And increasingly, Azerbaijan was betting on military solution. And this military solution came in 2020, first round, when Azerbaijan took back several districts surrounding Karabakh and 25% of the Karabakh territory. And the last round was this year, recently, when Azerbaijan finished the reconquest of the entire region of Karabakh. Russia's role in this conflict was very interesting. Russia was pretty much busy with the conflict in Ukraine and didn't really intervene militarily. Even politically, their intervention was quite limited. And Azerbaijan and Turkey in tandem solved the problem according to their terms and imposing their terms not only to Armenia but also to Russia. The answer from the Armenian side is growing disappointment in this strategic alliance they had with Russia, and trying to look for even more contacts with the West, with the United States of America, and also European Union. Armenia didn't conclude, as I said, the association agreement with the European Union, but there is an agreement that was signed, which is less important than and less comprehensive than association agreements and the DCFTA, but there is still some level of relations with between Armenia and the European Union, and the current government is seeking really to develop more links with the European Union, and I hope the European Union will answer with more positive openness towards Armenia, and will help this country to diminish its dependence on Russia. I can stop here because already 15 minutes passed, and we have, as I know, very limited time, so I'd be glad to answer the questions. It was a very general introduction to the situation in the region.
Well, thank you, Tornike, for your analysis and this presentation. And I know you will closely monitor the situation for the Jacques Delors Institute in the coming months. So we received a few questions, maybe a first one regarding the European Commission announcement today. What will the European Union, European Council, in your opinion, make of the recommendation by today Commission for Georgia?
Sorry, your voice was cut at the end. So I heard the beginning. So it was about the decision, the announcement of the Commission, and then the question.
What do you think that the European Council in December will make these recommendations for Georgia?
Yes. Okay. I think European Council will follow the recommendation, but maybe the language will not be exactly the same, because in my contacts with different member states, there are serious doubts coming from different members of the European Union about the merits of the current government of Georgia. I can name them. Usually, the best friends of Georgia inside the European Union are Baltic states, Poland, and some other Eastern European partners. All of them are quite critical. I would say they are in favor of not granting the candidate status because they understand the geopolitical interest of giving the candidate status to Georgia. First of all, giving the candidate status to Georgia is bad for Russia, and it's showing and marking the driving the line for better integration of Georgia in the European Union. So it's a geopolitical decision, but at the same time, these countries, plus few others, maybe for slightly different reasons as France and some Western European countries like Netherlands, are critical because of the internal dynamics of the country, because of the non-respect of European values by the government, and they will be critical. I think the decision at the end will be positive, but with lots of criticism, and the decision to launch negotiations, to start negotiations, will be postponed until the end of 2024, and will be linked to the elections of general elections of Georgia, which are scheduled in October. Already today in the announcement, there were conditions enumerated for Georgia to continue this European integration platform, and elections are already mentioned as a very important litmus test for this further integration and further process and deepening the process of starting the process of negotiations. Today, Ukraine and Moldova, the Commission gave the recommendation to start negotiations with the Ukraine and Moldova, and Georgia is still lagging behind. Whereas in the past it was the contrary. Georgia had many advantages compared to the two other members of this trio, including less corruption, much better functioning public sector, and still, which is still the case, the tremendous majority of the Georgian population was in favor of European Union and Georgia's integration with the European Union.
Maybe a follow-up question on that. So 2/3, as I was told, are pro-European in Georgia. Could the diverted goal of the Georgian people and the Georgian government become a source of current crisis in the country?
I'm sorry, your voice is not, for me, it's cut. So can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. No, it was 2/3 of the Georgian population are pro-European, but the current Georgian government is not really pro-EU. So is it going to be a current crisis in the country in the future, according to you?
I think it's more than 2/3, because when you see the last public opinion polls, it's between 75% and 80%. Then it's maybe people have different motivations to be pro-European in Georgia. Some see just a better level of economic development or prosperity. Others see maybe more democracy and more protection of their rights. But overall, it's very high percentage of Georgian population who are in favor of the integration. Among them are those who also vote for the current party, which is illustrated, which has a very ambiguous position. So they are criticizing European Union. At the end of the day, I think they are not pro-European, but they also need to win elections. So they cannot attack directly and boldly European Union. And they cannot say that Georgia doesn't want to be integrated in European Union. Their position was, we want the European Union, but at the same time, they were showing to the population how unfair and how bad the European Union was, and how their values, European values, were far from Georgian values. And that's why they found in the person of Viktor Orban their best ally. Georgian government's attitude is we're a Christian country, we have conservative values, and these values are not guaranteed by Europe. And by the way, we are treated unfairly because and European Union is oppressive to Georgia because we are not aligning ourselves to everything they ask. And also in the case of the war in Ukraine, Georgia refused to open the second front. That was the clear statements of the representatives of the current government, saying that European Union and the United States, they want Georgia to be dragged in the war against Russia, which is of course not true, but that was their attitude, showing that, okay, we want the European Union, but they ask things that are impossible to us, and they are unfair. And in doing this, they were pursuing the objective of keeping their electorate, at least half of this electorate is still pro-European, but saying that, okay, if it doesn't work, it's Europe's fault. So explaining to their electorate that maybe we don't need Europe at the end of the day because their conditions are so impossible for us. And they developed a dialogue with China. The Prime Minister of Georgia was invited in China, and he met Xi Jinping, and he made very solemn statements about the partnership with China and the prosperity and the development that the China can bring to Georgia, and even praising the Chinese model. And what the things that they cannot do openly is the rapprochement with Russia. But the Russians, from their side, made many statements praising Georgian government and their policies. So yes, there is a discrepancy between public opinion and the government, but the government still wanted the candidate status for internal political reasons. So they can't win elections if Europe, if they don't get candidate status, and if they in the future don't get the negotiations started. So we have this paradoxical situation that for internal reasons they need to show that they are still pro-European, but at the same time they are not, and there is contradiction that will become impossible one day. We see these contradictions in the Western Balkans. We have some governments who say, "Oh, we are negotiating with Europe. We want Europe. We want the crosses on some on the paper." But in general, they are using this process as internal political weapon inside the country, and the integration, the real integration with the European Union, is not coming. And I'm afraid that this decision is great. I think it's great for Georgian population and the future of Georgia. But immediately, the current government will not change anything, not because they have the candidate status that they will become more democratic, more liberal. I don't think so. They will use it, even paradoxically, they will use it to reinforce their position and to say we were right, and the European Union recognized that our policies so far, everything was right.
Well, thank you. Another question, how do energy partnership with the European Union play into Azerbaijan overall foreign policy strategy, and how do they impact its relationship with the EU in comparison to political agreement like association agreement?
Oh, this is not, of course, the energy partnership is not a political agreement. This is commercial and economic agreements. And for Azerbaijan, this is clearly their priority. They, as I said in the introduction, very quickly after the launching of Eastern Partnership and even the negotiations, because association agreement talks have started with Azerbaijan in 2010, but they were interrupted, they were stopped a few months or maybe 1 or 2 years later because Azerbaijan didn't show interest, because the whole objective of the association agreement and the DCFTA is to transform and to make the countries which conclude this agreements, to make them more European and to make them aligned with European practices and values. And it's in contradiction with the current political system in Azerbaijan, and they don't, they say it very openly. We have our way of development, which is not exactly what the European Union is asking, and they have quite effective diplomacy, foreign policy based on transactional relations with the partners. They have extremely strong relations with Turkey, and this is the partnership that helped Azerbaijan also to recover its territorial integrity. They are more or less on the same line in the relations with the European Union when it comes, with Turkey, and they developed their bilateral relations with different partners. They have very strong relations with Israel, based on cooperation in security field. We saw that Azerbaijan also used Israeli material, not only Turkish but Israeli material, in the war against Armenia, and these relations between Azerbaijan, and Israel are based on a common the perceived threat coming from Iran, and this is very interesting how now with the war in Gaza, the Azerbaijani government is trying to monitor very closely the groups inside the society who could use this partnership as a criticism against their government, because 90%, a little bit less, but yes, 90% of the population is Muslim, and 70% is Shia Muslim in Azerbaijan. So coming back to the cooperation with the European Union, yes, the Azerbaijan is understands that their role, their importance for European Union increased in terms of energy cooperation because of Russia, because of the conflict in Ukraine, and because of the fact that Russia is out, and they also use this tool to put some pressure on Europeans to not to criticize too much Azerbaijan in their policies of military solution of the Karabakh conflict, even in the fact when most of the population, Armenian population of Karabakh, is now leaving the country, and I wouldn't say it is there are some massacres or violent behavior from the Azerbaijani military, but this Armenian population understands that they cannot live anymore in this country under Azerbaijani domination, and European Union is not exactly very active in trying to obtain from Azerbaijan guarantees for these populations. They were reactions, but these reactions were not strong enough to convince the Azerbaijani government to give more guarantees that they are offering right now.
Well, thank you. A follow-up question on that. Given the recent military defeat by Azerbaijan, what specific action or signal has Armenia sent to demonstrate a desire to close tie to the European Union in terms of foreign policy?
Again, I'm sorry, I heard only the beginning of the question. Can you?
Okay, I'll repeat.
So after the defeat of Armenia in this conflict, and then it was cut.
Yes. How did they demonstrate a close tie to the European Union in their foreign policy?
Armenia?
Yes.
I think that Armenia has, geopolitically speaking, Armenia is in very difficult position because Russia was so far for 25 or 30 years the only, almost the only partner, at least in terms of security, was the only partner of Armenia, and also economically, the Russian influence is extremely high because Russia obtained the control, I mean, financial control of the most of Armenia's strategic economic assets as energy, transport, etc. And it happened in the 90s or in the years 2000 in exchange of enormous energy debt that Armenia contracted with Russia. Armenia was unable to pay for energy imports from Russia, and Russia obtained in exchange of erasing this debt lots of strategically important Armenian enterprises. So Russian influence is very strong. Russia has a military base in Armenia. Russia has border guards in Armenia, and also the current Armenian economy is very much dependent on Russia. So this attempt to diversify the foreign policy will continue, but Armenia needs more engagement from European side to show that the Europeans are also ready to receive Armenia as and I always advocate from the European Union to grant the European perspective to Armenia, to declare symbolically it would be very, very strong that Armenia has a chance in future to become member of the European Union. This would help the current Armenian leadership, who is struggling after the defeat and after the Russian meddling in internal politics of Armenia. Russia is supporting all anti-Western forces inside Armenia, former political forces that were in power and were closely working with Russia and they are attempting to overthrow or to defeat the current government, and this government is struggling. So far they have managed to survive, but they need a strong European support, starting with this recognition of the European future for Armenia, and providing the developments, internal developments, reforms, etc. Why not granting them the candidate status like they granted to Georgia? Honestly, today I can tell you that if you take the democracy level and the level of reforms in terms of liberal democratic reforms, Armenia is doing better than Georgia. The fact is that there is still a huge Russian influence in Armenia, and that makes the decisions maybe more difficult for the European Union. But I hope in the future Armenia will join this trio, and there will be 4 countries among the the former Eastern Partnership states to start negotiations with the European Union. And time will come that Belarus will also be part of this group.
Yeah, let's hope so. Thank you, Tornike, for your
Thank
presentation.
you.
And thank you to you for following today your question. We will send the replay over to you in the afternoon. The next
Thank
session,
you very much.
Thank you. The next session will be held on Wednesday, 22nd of November. We will have the pleasure to welcome Camille Defar, head of our Energy Center, and she will present her report on the Energy Union. Thank you again and have a nice afternoon. Au revoir.
Thank you. Au revoir.